Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Om Times Radio.
Welcome to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. I'm a clinical sexologist based in Singapore, and my company is called Eros Coaching. That's eroscoaching.com. This show explores the link between sexuality and spirituality, and it really started from my realization that the two are not mutually exclusive, and then they don't have to be separated or compartmentalized. For a long time, these were two different interests that I had, and I didn't see the link between the two. So this show explores all about that. Today's show is going to be about sex education. And we have an amazing, wonderful person. He's really the best person I can really talk to about sex education. I know I've talked about it before with different guests, but today's guest is really in his own league. He's really special. I'm so happy, so honored that he's agreed to come on this show. I've been trying to get him for quite some time. Today's show title is called The World of Sexuality Education, and we are with Bill Taverner. He's the Executive Director of the Center for Sex Education, which hosts the National Sex Ed Conference held every year in New Jersey, USA in December. In today's show, Bill will be talking about this year's conference, which features many of the world's leading experts in sexuality education, addressing a spectrum of sexual topics for all ages. Like I mentioned, he's the Executive Director of the Center for Sex Education. He's also the Editor-in-Chief of the American Journal of Sexuality Education. He has co-authored many sex ed teaching resources, and he has received national awards recognizing his leadership in sex education. I'll tell you more about him as the show progresses. You can find out more about his work by going to sexedcenter.org. That's SexEd Center, CENTER.org. So welcome to the show, Bill.
Martha, it's so nice to be able to speak with you on air. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you.
I am too.
really honored because, you have done so much good work, published so much materials. You have a wealth of information and knowledge. So tell us more, like what exactly you do as the Executive Director.
Sure. So the Center for Sex Education, which is part of Planned Parenthood in New Jersey, is we've been around since 1980, and we changed our name about a year and a half ago from the Center for Family Life Education to the Center for Sex Education. And so what we do is we publish sex ed teaching manuals that are used all over the world. We also host the National Sex Ed Conference every December, and we have an online resource center where people pay a membership fee and they can access hundreds of sex ed lesson plans, including the American Journal of Sexuality Education and all back issues. So that's what we do here at the center, and I have been fortunate to be here for the past almost 18 years.
Wow.
My predecessor was Peggy Brick, who is an internationally renowned expert in sexuality education, and I have been very fortunate to work closely with her on a number of projects and learned a great deal of what I know about sexuality education from having been able to work with her, and also being surrounded by many talented people who do great work in sexuality education.
Yeah, I consider you one of the talented people. How did you get to be talented or so good at what you do?
Well, probably by doing very poorly when I first started out. I would say that when I had my first course as an undergraduate professor, I was someone who gave a lot of lectures, and so I had a lot of sexual knowledge that that I was able to relay to students. But what I was observing is their inability to retain any of the information. I mean, they would study for their exams, they would do fine on their exams, but there was nothing that was really retained. And I think that that's one of the drawbacks of lecturing at students. And one of the things that I learned from working with Peggy Brick and other colleagues at the center, Sue Montfort, Melissa Keys DeJoya, Allison Sandak, Karen Rain, and many, many others, is that that you really need to engage young people, and not just young people, learners of all ages. You have to engage them. You have to meet them where they are. You have to find out where they're coming from. And you can't just talk at them. You have to invite their opinions. You have to create strategies that help people to have conversations with each other, to interact, kinesthetic activities. All of that I've learned in my almost 18 years here at the center. And I would say that I'm a very, very different teacher than I was when I started.
Yeah. Do you still do lecturing of students in your role as executive director right now, or you just manage a lot of publications that are coming out?
More and more of my job these days is in the management of the center and developing business initiatives. Occasionally, I have the opportunity to write a lesson plan or to critically review one of our publications that's in development. And occasionally I'm invited to give a talk at a college or at a conference somewhere, and I truly love those moments. I love working with audiences. I love training teachers. One of my favorite things to do is to work with parents of young children and help them shape the sexual health of their young children and learn to answer their questions in positive, affirming ways, to know the names of their body parts. I absolutely love working with parents of young children and teachers of young children as well. That's one of my favorite things to do.
And you are a parent yourself.
I am, yes. I have two boys. One, my older son just started college, and my younger son is 12, almost going to be 13 this next month. Yeah, and they probably have more information about sex and sexuality than the average kid. They probably roll their eyes at me from time to time because it's a subject that really interests me, but they probably know a lot more than their peers. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of other young people don't have a whole lot of information. But my kids have more than they need, I think.
They don't think that you are cool dad, able to talk about all these topics.
Well, I don't know who is a cool dad. I think that, I think I'm probably a weird dad compared, and that's probably the perspective of every child, who's, if they have friends over and, I've had this experience where my younger son has had friends over and I hear them talking about, I'll hear his friend ask a question or make a comment about something sexually related. And then I'll come in with information and my son Christopher will be completely embarrassed. But the child, I think his friend will appreciate the information.
Yeah. Yeah, might as well use you as a resource. I think it's a great way to connect.
I think so. And I wish more parents felt comfortable having open conversations with their children, because certainly children want to be able to turn to their parents as primary resources of information. And I think a lot of parents want that as well, but don't necessarily know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think our work is really, really cool. It brings us into a league of coolness because this is a topic that a lot of people don't talk about. Maybe your kids might feel embarrassed right now. However, I think they might change their minds in time to come. I always like to share this story about my mom. When growing up, my mom used to walk around the house naked, and me and my sister, we would laugh at her and say, "Oh, you're walking naked. Don't you have any shame?" And my mom would say, "Oh, this is my body. This is my house. There's really nothing to be shameful about. Both of you came from my body." And we just couldn't shame her. And later growing up, I realized how rare it was. And I think a big part of my confidence with my own body and my sexuality actually came from my mom. So I think kids do pick up a lot more from their parents, and therefore the importance of sex ed for parents comes in.
That's a wonderful story, and I bet you didn't appreciate it at the moment, but to be able to reflect back on it and to see the value of positive, affirming messages that your mom was giving you, is wonderful. I have a story to share too, but I know we're coming up on a break, and maybe I could tell you more when we come back.
Yeah, we'll talk about it after the break. We are with Bill Taverner. He's the Executive Director of the nationally acclaimed Center for Sex Education. He's the Editor-in-Chief for the American Journal of Sexuality Education, and he's co-authored many sex ed teaching resources, including Making Sense of Abstinence, Older, Wiser, Sexually Smarter, Positive Images, Sex Ed 101, and 8 editions of Taking Sides, Clashing Views in Human Sexuality. More with him after this break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
I'm Maggie Chula.
And I'm Catherine Glass.
And we're the Psychic Angel Channelers. Join us every week here on Om Times Radio for Angel Talk Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution. We are talking about the World of Sexuality Education in today's show, and we are with Bill Taverner, the Executive Director of Center for Sex Education. You are listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network, and you can share the show with your friends by sending them the link omtimes.com/mobile. With this link, your friends will be able to listen to the show without needing to download any app. How cool is that? So we are with Bill, and just before break, he was telling us that he was going to share a story with us.
Yeah, well, we were talking about moments with parents that have influenced our understanding of sexuality. And one of the stories that I like to tell is when my son Robbie was 6 years old, and his teacher asked he and his classmates to draw a picture of one of their parents at work. So you can see where this is going. And so Robbie drew a picture of me, and at the top of the page it said college professor, and there was me in front of a group of students, and on the blackboard was me pointing to the blackboard with sex in big letters. And the bubble that was coming out of my mouth said, "Sex is when two married people join the egg and the sperm," which is a reasonable definition when you're 6 years old. And but it was very, very upsetting to the teacher. And the teacher told him that his work was inappropriate. And it took us a good week to find out the teacher's reaction, because Robbie came home and he just didn't want to talk about it at all. Oh, yeah. So he received a very strong shaming message from his teacher at a very, very young age. But something that is common, I think. I don't really blame the teacher that much, because I think many teachers would have responded the same way. We haven't developed a framework as a society to be able to integrate sex and sexuality as a normal part of who we are. Where we treat it as something that is either something to joke about or something to be intrigued by, but never something to communicate about honestly and openly. And so the first grade teacher was as unprepared as anyone in society.
That doesn't sound like a happy story. It's really a sad story.
It is. Well, I think that, to put a positive spin on this is that there's some really wonderful books out there. Some of my favorite books are written by Roby Harris, and she's the author of It's Perfectly Normal and It's So Amazing and It's Not the Stork. And she has these books that are for children as young as 3 or 4 years old through their puberty years. And they're bright, colorful books that speak honestly about sexuality, and they've been translated in many, many different languages. And Roby is actually going to be one of our featured speakers at the National Sex Ed Conference. We are the opening evening of the conference. We are somehow we've managed to convince both Roby and a number of other leaders in sexuality education to come to this event in their pajamas and be willing to read her books aloud to the other participants. And we're going to serve cookies and milk. So we should have a lot of fun.
Fun.
While role modeling, how we can have these important, open conversations with young children that I wish so many more parents would do.
Yeah. So tell me more about your conference. I know you say that you run it every year, but how long has it been running every year?
The conference has been around for 30 years, but it's been a national conference for the last 5. It started out as primarily a New Jersey conference, and about 5 years ago, we started seeing that more and more people were contacting us from other states and then other parts of the world, and so it's grown quite a bit. We're expecting about 800 people this year, and that's grown from about 700 last year and about 550 the year before. So it's growing, and one of the nice features that we have this year is we have speakers from every continent. That's brand new for us. We did put out a call through the World Association for Sexual Health, and we did have a number of people respond. So we have speakers from every continent, including
Asia.
Including Asia, and someone also who is an expert on sex, if you could believe this, sex in Antarctica.
With
not with the penguins.
That's what I was thinking.
But this is someone. His name is Dr. Ray Noonan, and Ray is he did his dissertation in sex in extreme environments, and so he's very knowledgeable not just about sex in Antarctica, but also in outer space. He's had the opportunity to meet with the likes of Buzz Aldrin, and he's got some great anecdotes and some great insight about how sex is different in extreme environments, both physiologically and relationally, in terms of the toll that long voyages take on relationships. So I think his session is going to be fascinating. But it's one of 76 concurrent sessions that we're going to have at the conference. We have a number of keynote speakers and other featured speakers. It's just going to be a wonderful time.
Yeah, it really sounds like it. It's really awesome that you have so many people, but not all of them are sexuality educators, right? I would assume parents would also be interested to attend.
Sure, we do get some parents who attend, and we get people from different types of disciplines. We get a number of social workers. We get lots of community educators and college professors. We get some sex therapists and other therapists, guidance counselors. So people who are interested in developing and implementing teen pregnancy prevention programs. And we have sessions for people for professionals who work with people of all ages.
It's really, really, really awesome. So for those people who are interested to sign up for this conference or find out more about it, you can go to sexedconference.com. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us with regards to the conference? It sounds really amazing.
You know, one of the things that I'm really excited about this year is, just turning the calendar back a year ago at our last conference. The last conference was happening just as a lot of racial strife was unfolding in real time, and on the morning of the first morning of our conference last year, we learned, all of the audience learned together about the failed indictment of a police officer from New York, from Staten Island, New York, which happens to be my hometown, who was responsible for the death of an African American man. And he was, and we learned the morning of the conference that they failed to indict him. And a lot of people were upset. And this was happening in the wake of Ferguson and so many other acts of injustice. There were also some things that were going on within the field of sexuality education where there's been an ongoing conversation for years in the field of sexuality where people present keynotes and workshops at many different conferences that are not inclusive of people of all backgrounds, and it was ripe. The time was ripe for conversation. So at our conference last year, this was not planned at all. This all happened in real time. There was the creation of a solidarity statement on racial justice in sexuality education. So a number of people came together at the conference and created this statement that was very, very powerful. It was read by Cindy Lee Alves of the Women of Color Sexual Health Network, and it was one of those moments that it brought chills to me to not only to listen to her read the statement, but also to see the entire audience gradually stand up in solidarity. So the opening keynote at our conference this year invites Cindy Lee back along with Marlene Prey and Trina Scott, who are going to plan and advocate for the next steps in what do we do now. We created this statement on racial justice and sexuality education, and now what do we do with it? So that's an exciting moment for me and for many people at the conference. Martha, may I read the statement?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Because we are in the field of sexuality education, a profession skilled at creating space for dialogue, acknowledging difficult topics, and facilitating change. Because we stand on the shoulders of many before us, some who have received recognition and others who have not. Because we live in a country founded on systems of oppression, institutionalized racism and violence. Because we see police brutality, racial profiling, and mass incarceration as a gross misuse of power, which terrorizes individuals, families, and communities. Because we know the system is not broken, it is doing exactly as intended. Because of all of this and so much more, we also know that because we are part of the problem, we are also part of the solution. Because we as sexuality educators teach about love, equity, justice, relationships, communication, and safety. Because we, in living our lives fully with intention, agency, and freedom from fear, because we hold power as individuals, as organizations, because we can and we must, as a multicultural group, we commit to addressing and working to undo racism on personal, professional, and institutional levels within the field of sexuality education and in our diverse roles within it, in solidarity with other movements towards racial justice. Today, we commit to the formation of plans of action towards racial justice in sexuality education.
That's really powerful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And there were a number of people who came together to create this, and it couldn't have been done without the collaboration of the Women of Color Sexual Health Network and other leaders such as Dr. Karen Rain.
Yeah. It's really wonderful that, as the executive director, you can be part of all this in orchestrating things to happen, groundbreaking work, and really pioneer a lot of these initiatives that are changing the world.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a very memorable moment in my career to be part of this and to watch this unfold. As I said, this was completely unplanned. In fact, we were fortunate last year. We had a few celebrity speakers, and as all of this was happening, I happened to be picking up Jane Fonda at the airport, so I missed the creation of this, and to come back to the conference and see all of this happening. Again, that, you think you plan every last minute of the conference, and probably the most powerful moment last year was unscripted. So I'm really looking forward to what Cindy Lee and Marlene and Trina have to say this year.
Awesome. Really awesome. Yeah. You can plan everything, but things come up and you just need to be ready to go with the flow sometimes. And I'm glad you mentioned that the most powerful moment was actually unplanned. And so there must be more to look forward to this year. It's not like, topping something for the sake of it, but just knowing that such openness to things unfolding is possible makes, I think, your conference something that's special to attend.
Thanks. Yeah, the conference is all about the participants. It's the presenters who bring their expertise and their talents, and it's the participants who really drive the show. I mean, we can set the stage, but it's really up to the participants.
Mm. Yeah. So do check out sexedconference.com, and you'll be able to find out more about this conference, including the breakout sessions, the speakers, and so on and so forth. It's pretty amazing because I know, now somebody who's behind this conference, And I've been following Bill's work, and it's really admirable. I just haven't had the opportunity to attend it because it's such a long way and expensive for me to go all the way to the US to attend events. But this is definitely something I want to make sure that I attend in soon.
Oh, Martha, we'd love to have you as a guest at our conference.
I know. It's expensive, and there are lots to think about. Usually December it can be a quiet period. It can also be a busy time for me as the year unwinds and people want to get their act together for the next year. So sometimes it's very challenging. I don't know whether to take time off or not take time off. It's tricky because I want to be around for people and to help as many people as I can as well. It's not just about the money for me.
Sure.
Okay, so I did want to mention about this news that came out just a few days ago. Actually, I think yesterday it broke, where this famous Hollywood celebrity, his name is Charlie Sheen. He actually came forward and declared or announced that he's HIV positive, and he had been for a number of years since 2011, and he had been kind of blackmailed, and he parted with like millions of dollars to keep his HIV status secret, and he just got tired of it and decided to come out and announce this. And I think in some ways this does create a lot of attention on consent and ethics. What are the right things to do if you are HIV positive, whether you let your partners know about it, and also what people should be knowing about how HIV gets transmitted. So this is something that's very, very topical right now. What do you maybe if you can comment like a few words about this piece of news?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned when we were talking before the show, this was brand new news to me. I think I've had my head buried in our conference planning too much. But my reaction is that it speaks to the shame that is the cloud of shame that is associated with all things sexual, and to think that a person would be living with HIV and not be able to say it publicly for fear of damaging his career. That's a really sad state of things, because it's if we step back for a moment and we think about the humanity of how we should be interacting with each other, a person who has HIV is not someone who should be shamed. It's a person who needs support, and it makes me very, very sad to think that our society is so shaming in so many ways. You're also raising the issue of ethics and communication with one's partner, and I don't know all the facts about Charlie Sheen and his situation, but certainly it's something that you would want to disclose to your partner, and I just don't know enough about what's been going on with him to say more about that.
Yeah, I do agree with you about the shame and secrecy around HIV, and in a way I'm glad such a public figure is coming forward, because now people are talking about consent and ethics, and also how HIV is transmitted, and I think more people are also starting to be aware that HIV is not a death sentence, that you can be taking antivirals, and the condition can still be stable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The living with HIV is very different in 2015 than it was in the 1980s or even the 1990s. And our messaging needs to be different on it. But I think, like so many other aspects of sexuality, many people are just not there where we can have these conversations in non-sensationalized ways. So I know that every time that a news story hits where a celebrity has something going on that is tangentially related to sexuality, we become mesmerized by it. And in a way that is very different than, let's say that, had Charlie Sheen been affected by, another type of illness. If you look at, someone like Michael J. Fox, we treat the illnesses very differently. One with a lot more compassion and one with a lot more finger wagging. And I think that that's unfortunate.
Yeah, you're right. There's this sensationalization around sex because we don't talk about it. And so anything around sex, it's like, what's that?
Right.
Yeah, right. You're right. And in a way, I am also guilty of it because I like sex. I like the topic of sex. So anything about sex is something that I have always been interested in. And so maybe it is because of the lack of such conversations that made me curious about it and then started to want to learn more and then pursue this career. So for some people, it still continues to be a topic of a lot of shame and secrecy and sex being seen as some kind of perversion, which is a shame. Which brings me to the question, because this show explores the link between sexuality and spirituality, what do you feel is the link between the two?
As you were, we talked earlier about early influences, and as I think of the link to spirituality and sexuality, I can't help but think of one of my early influences and something that I think had a big impact, and it was within a religious context. So as a high school student, as a high school freshman, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school in New York, and I remember our guidance counselor, who was a priest, starting off our class, and we said the Lord's Prayer to begin the class, and then he started off by saying, well, I know a lot of you guys like to masturbate. And he was both our guidance counselor and our religion teacher, and this was going to be our one and only course in lesson on sex.
Oh no.
So we're all 13, 14 years old, and he's got our full attention because he said that we all like to masturbate, and we all looked up and wondered, how does he know? And he said, and this was very profound. I mean, Father Frank was a very, very loving man, very loving priest. And he said, there's two things that you need to know about it. One is that it's not something that you talk about at cocktail parties, which still makes me laugh because I wonder, where did you get that? Cocktail parties. And not only that, but I go to professional conferences all the time when we talk about these things at cocktail parties. So that was his first message. And his second message was, it's something that you eventually grow out of.
Oh, no.
Right. Now, you and I know that he was wrong on both counts. And maybe for most people, he was right on the first one. But the undercurrent of his message still stays with me because you can interpret that as a sex negative comment. But what I took away from it is, here was a priest who was telling his students, stop worrying. Don't worry so much. And he was more concerned about our anxiety, even if he was wrong, and saying that you'll grow out of it. And of course, people don't grow out of it. People continue to masturbate throughout their lives. We know that from the research. but he was coming from a compassionate place where he wanted us to know, guys, it's something that's normal. I know you do it. I know that everybody does it, or most people do. Stop worrying about it. And then we went on to something else we literally spent 10 minutes, and that was my entire sex education in high school.
Wait, 10 minutes on sex ed talking about masturbation, or what else did he talk about?
That we went on to suicide. I mean, that was it. That was it until I think until I was a senior, and then we had to memorize a VD chart. But between all of that time, I got no other sex education in high school, and I think that's one of the things that propelled me to do work in this field. By the time I got to college, I took an undergraduate course in human sexuality, and I was, as someone who had never had any information about sexuality, I just found it utterly intriguing how little I knew about the subject, and that made me want to learn and study as much as I could on the subject.
What I like about your story with the priest is, hearing the story makes me feel, oh, this is like a horrible, horrible sex ed. But what you communicated was different. What you communicated was him saying, don't worry about it, and having compassion. And I think that is from the tone. So what I think you picked up on was the intent behind the message. And I think it's just as important in knowing that they mean well and have compassion than the message itself. I think that is a big thing that a lot of people are scared talking about sex with their kids or with their friends, because they're afraid that they don't get the facts right, and then they just don't say anything.
I completely agree with you. And I would also think, I think about, that moment in high school, and I seriously wonder if that would happen at that same high school today. I think that the discussions regarding sex at the high school level have, or philosophies have become so polarized where on one set of ideology says that we can't talk about anything but abstinence. And then another ideology says, well, we have to prepare young people with as much information as they can to prevent teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. And I think what's lost in these two divergent ideologies is opportunities to talk about everything else that makes up our sexuality. So we're not exploring in sex education healthy and unhealthy relationships, not as much as we should be. There's been this heavy, heavy focus on teen pregnancy prevention, or trying to convince kids not to have sex until they're married. But we need a lot more that helps young people learn about everything else that comes that is a part of sexuality.
Yeah. So
and, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I relayed this story in a book that my organization published last year, called "How I Got Into Sex Ed," and mine was one of 60 something stories where people told their stories of how they got into the field. Some really, really wonderful stories, and I know we're going to give out a link so that all of your listeners can download it for free.
Yes. That's right.
After we published that book, the first copy that I sent was to Father Frank, because I told the story, about him, and he wrote me back a very kind note that, meant a lot to me. So, and I think captured where he was coming from all along, although I don't think that he wanted to admit that he ever gave that lesson. So, but can I give out that link?
Oh, yes. I was just about to do it, but yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So, the link is www.sexedstore.com/freegift, FREEGIFT. And then once you get to that page, there's a password that you need to enter, and that password is free book. So if you go to sexedstore.com/free gift, and then you type in free book in the password section, then you can download a copy of How I Got Into Sex Ed, available on both iBooks and Kindle.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this gift. I believe it's going to be, filled with interesting, fun stories, and this can help lift some of the sex shame and secrecy that I feel a lot of us have.
Yeah, I agree. There's some really powerful stories, of people taking a friend to for an abortion, for example, where when it wasn't legal, and how that made them want to be supporters of sex education and to do everything that they could to make sure that young people had as much information as possible. There's funny stories by some very, very funny colleagues like Sam Killerman, a social justice comedian, and Elizabeth Schroeder. Both of whom are outstanding leaders in the field of sexuality education. We had a wonderful essay by former U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jocelyn Elders, and Reverend Hafner, and many other leaders. Al Vernacchio.
That's great. That's really great. I'm not familiar with a lot of the people in the U.S., but Jocelyn Elders is one of those people that I have some admiration for, because she was the one who got fired for what she said about masturbation. And because of what she said, this whole movement around having Masturbation Month in May started happening.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually run this campaign every year in May called Masturbation Month. In Singapore, where sex is not really talked about much, being an Asian country as well, having the word Masturbation Month in May really does have, that does raise some eyebrows.
I'm sure it's one of those topics that makes a lot of people anxious, and we don't know how to handle it. I didn't mean that as a pun. But it's one of those topics that makes people edgy, and we have so many myths and misinformation about masturbation. As I think about it, and I think what Dr. Elders was saying, when she gave a press conference and someone asked her a question about should students learn about masturbation, and her response, I don't remember it verbatim, but it was something to the effect of I think it's it's something that young people engage in, and we should be talking about. And I don't know that her response was all that different than Father Frank's. I think a lot of what we do in sex education is to help people at any age recognize what's normal, and to reassure people that there's a lot of things that we do and a lot of things that happen to our bodies that are perfectly normal. Father Frank was doing that, Dr. Elders was doing that, and you're doing that with what you do with Masturbation Month in normalizing the behavior. Yeah,
and your work does go a long way towards that, and you're right in the thick of things, because you come up with all these publications to help sex educators, and this is really advocacy work that you're doing that's really, changing the world. I keep saying that, but I really believe it's true.
Thank you, Martha.
So let me talk a little bit more about Bill's background. He has served as editor-in-chief for the 2-volume third edition of Teaching Safer Sex, which received the 2013 ASEC Book Award. He's a trainer of thousands throughout the United States, which has twice advocated for sexuality education at U.S. congressional briefings. And Bill has received other national awards recognizing his leadership in sexuality education. The first Shooter Prize, given by American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, which is also ASEC, for Best Workshop Using Interactive Strategies, Planned Parenthood's Golden Apple Award for Leadership in Education, a Sexual Intelligence Award naming him one of the country's preeminent sex educators, trainers, and sex education theorists, and the Golden Brick Award for encouraging the growth of sex ed professionals. So this is the reason why I was saying at the beginning of today's show that he is really the number one person that I would want to talk to with regards to sex education. I've had different guests. However, he's the one who's really at the thick of everything and really championing initiatives that really shape and change the climate when it comes to sexuality education. So we've been talking about his conference, and you can find it at thesexedconference.com. It is about this National Sex Ed Conference, which is held every year in New Jersey and is happening again this year. He has amazing speakers lined up for this year, and you definitely want to check it out. So
Martha,
yes.
Thank you so much for saying those nice things about me. But I also have to say that there are. I am just so fortunate to be surrounded by outstanding people. It is, we have 150 people who are going to be presenting workshops at the conference, and so they're bringing in all of their expertise to the conference. I have so many talented writers and editors who I've worked with over the years who publish our books. And I'd like to especially, mention our conference chairs. Dr. Karen Rain is our chair for the National Sex Ed Conference. Lorena Olvera Moreno is the associate chair, as well as Jennifer Hart. It's these colleagues, as well as our staff here at the Center for Sex Education, Jeff and Kiara, who together, we put on a terrific conference. I was very fortunate early in my career to develop a professional relationship with Dr. Robert T. Francoeur, who has been recognized as a significant leader in the field of sexuality. He's the chief editor and then co-editor of the International Encyclopedia of Sexuality, and Bob and I worked together on a number of projects. But one of the things that I learned from him is the art of collaboration. I was mesmerized when he was developing this massive international encyclopedia of sexuality, and all I wanted to know is, can I help you? Can I look up your citations? Can I, is there anything I can typeset for you? That was my interest in the work. But as I worked with him, I saw how he was able to tap into brilliant minds throughout the field of sexuality throughout the world, and that is something that I like to say that I've learned from him, and I've been fortunate to follow in his footsteps in those ways, in being able to similarly work with many brilliant, talented people.
Yeah, I think indeed it's a real challenge to pull together so many people and bring out the best in them so that the best work can come forward. And I am really grateful to have you come on today's show. I'm wondering, what are your future plans besides the conference?
Well, yeah, taking a vacation after the conference. That's for sure. One of the things, that I'm kind of excited about at the conference and will occupy my time for some of my time for next year is I'm looking to develop a cookbook. I enjoy cooking, and I want to develop a collection of recipes that are all themed on the 5 circles of sexuality developed by Dr. Dennis Daly. Yeah. And so I'm planning on inviting contributors to submit recipes as well as essays that address different aspects of sexuality. So one on human sexual functioning, one on intimacy, and the challenge is going to be asking authors to connect the foods in some way to the circles, and I haven't quite figured out what the template's going to be, but I do have a love for cooking, and that's one of the things I'm looking forward to working on.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on to today's show. This has been Bill Taverner from the Center for Sex Education talking about the National Sex Ed Conference. You can go to his websites, that's sexedcenter.org, as well as sexedconference.com. And you can download a free book by going to sexedstore.com/free gift, key in the code free book, and you'll be able to download this book on how I got into sex ed. So this has been Dr. Martha Tara Lee of Eros Evolution, and you can find me next week on Eros Evolution summarizing some of my past shows, and I do this periodically so that we can glean from the best gems from all my guests, and I'm doing this again next week. So tune in to Eros Evolution again. Thank you so much for coming on.